welcome. Before we get started today, I just wanted to do a brief side note to the audience. You'll notice in episode 1 that I had some audio issues, and you'll notice in today's episode that there's a disconnect between my guest's audio and his video. I'm working in the background to control for these and improve incrementally episode to episode. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you, the audience's patience as I grow as a podcast host and producer. With that being said, welcome to episode 2 of Emotional Side Quest. In today's episode, I sit down with my dear friend Adam Anderson. I love Adam for many reasons. He's full of love, he's playful, he's a community builder in almost any space he enters. But I think what makes him stand out the most is that he diligently investigates his own experience, leading to some really profound insights for someone his age. I think you'll find these episodes are full of long, thoughtful pauses after each question and before each answer. During this time, I encourage you, the audience, to fill these thoughtful pauses with your own answers to these questions. And then when Adam's ready and he gives us the final product of his answer, joining us back in this space and walking through this adventure with us. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And now, Adam Anderson. Alrighty. You ready? Okay. Somebody, again, we're using this game. Where Should We Begin? By Esther Perel. I love this game. So I just have curated some cards with questions that I'm curious about what your answers are to them, if that's cool with you. Feel free at any time to say skip. You don't need to answer anything that I ask you. My intention is I'm going to ask you a question, have you answer the question, and then I will answer that same question after you're done, and then we'll move to the next question. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. If you need to take a break or whatever at any time, let me know. We can edit that out and stuff. Okay. First question is the person who taught me the most about love.
I taught myself the most about love. I learned it from other people, but none of them taught me anything about it of any value. It was always a lesson or a syllabus part. It was never the whole thing. I had to take the whole thing together and make it myself. It took a long time, and sometimes I still struggle to hold together the definition in my mind. But I get it from my mom, who loved me raw mother and son love, just trying to survive and feed him. And then my stepmom, who loved me unconditionally and taught me that there doesn't matter who is, how is, what is, you love them anyway. And then my partner that taught me that love is hard sometimes. And my friends that taught me that love is indiscriminate and seems minuscule at times and leaks through the cracks. It's liquid and wet and it gets in everywhere. And then all the people at the festivals taught me that love comes from everyone and the strangers too. But I had to gather all that myself and put it together. Without me, those would all just been parts of a definition and not a real thing.
I like that answer a lot. It's kind of aggregating the different inputs together and creating a final product that only the artist could aggregate.
I feel like for me, like I don't want to give the same answer, but I always think of this poem, "Call Me by My True Names" by Thich Nhat Hanh, where he talks about all the different incarnations that he identifies with, and um, the good and the bad and the beautiful and the ugly, and I don't know, man. Person who taught me the most about love. Yeah, it's just been like you said. I think figuring it out from the aggregates. If I had to like identify a single aggregate, I think it would either be Thich Nhat Hanh in that poem, or in the Book of Joy. And I talked about this last podcast too. In the Book of Joy, like the Dalai Lama talks about how one of his monks was captured by the Chinese, and the monk says, I was scared because I almost lost compassion for my captors, even though they were like torturing him and beating him. Like his whole essence was around trying to have compassion for people, no matter what, and like never putting them out of his heart. So I think that's a standard that it's like, damn, like that's a whole nother level that people don't really talk about. Um, and I think it was in that book where they said, "Do what you must do with another person, but never put them out of your heart." So that was kind of like a level of love that was identified as like a bar or a aspirational goal that I had never thought about. And I think Thich Nhat Hanh's poem is like another level of wider identification, which I think gets close to the meaning of love, the interconnectedness of all things. So those are probably the two most influential aggregates. But I think like the main teacher comes down to like what you said was like, you're the one who synthesizes it all together into uh, a final product, a final interpretation, and a final way of being in the world. So,
I'd like to give an honorable mention to the strangers, people that I don't know at all, because then I don't have any bias, and it's 100% projection. When I see someone that I don't know at all, and I have been in a state of love and fulfilling self-love, I see them as the happiest possible version of themselves until I get to know anything about them. And it's only through that experience, through thinking someone was some way, and then learning they weren't that way at all, and I completely made up all that shit in my mind, and then realized where it came from was the center of me. And I projected that love and that happiness onto them because I felt it come from me. That was a huge benefit, and I wouldn't have gotten that without that unbiased, unattached experience that I got only from strangers. And as soon as as soon as they're not strangers anymore, they're not connected to that lesson anymore.
it's like a mirror to receive your own projections from.
Yeah.
That's really dope. I really appreciate that honorable mention. Yeah, I don't want to give too many answers, but there's a Ram Dass lecture that I'm thinking of as well. Um, that's the one I sent you, the really long one I sent you. I don't know if you ever ended up listening to it, but some of what he talks about the it's been a while, but like love isn't unique's not the right word, but like special. Like no type of love I think like is especially important or higher than any other types. Like I'm not communicating that well, those aren't great words, but like that the core essence of love, whatever context, whatever relationship it shows up in, it's equivalent. It's an equivalent substance. It's like one pot made of clay and versus like a table made of clay versus something else made of clay. It's all the same equivalent clay, no matter what form it takes. And I think love's that way too. I'm not saying relationships don't hold different weights, but I think like the true nature of love, I think, isn't special. It's universal. And I think Ram Dass had a really good point in that lecture.
I like that.
Yeah. Alrighty. Next card. The next two cards, I don't know what they are. They're face down. They were shuffled. This will be fun. All right. I wish I had never seen.
What do you mean?
I don't know. It says, I wish I had never seen.
Am I supposed to finish that answer? That sentence?
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I had never seen the truth. I see a bunch of people around me that genuinely have grown old into ignorance, and they're happy. They found a way to be happy. So sometimes I wish I didn't have to do any of the work and I could just fall deeper into a pit and find a way to be happy.
I was really struggling with that in the spring last year, 2023. Yeah, it's a good answer. Really good answer. Appreciate that. I feel like I kind of have three answers, and I feel like that's cheating. I think the real answer for me is uh, that there's not really a valid answer on my end, because I feel like anything, like if I hadn't seen something, it would make me a different person, because it would be me minus an input that I've had in the past that made me who I am today. So I feel like I can't really answer that question. I wish I had never seen blank, 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 blank. My second answer to it was kind of on the more serious side. Forest 2019. We were like in the middle of, I think it was ranch, and there's just shouting, and then this go-kart comes through, and there's like three EMTs like doing CPR on a guy on the go-kart that's moving, and I was having a great night, and that was just like a really tragic reality check of how things can go. And I don't think anyone died that year, but just not knowing, just like the not knowing for the rest of the festival and for the years after, like I think got me a little bit. Um, and then a less serious answer, but equally true, is like there's a video where like Snoop Dogg reacts to how hot dogs are made, and that video is fucking disgusting. Yeah, I wish I had never seen that. That kind of ruined hot dogs for me. I mean, maybe it's healthier for me that I did see it, but I wish I didn't. You know,
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of my three. All right. I would never forgive you if blank.
I never forgive you if you left me without saying something.
Left you in what sense?
Yep, all of them. Every single one of them. Always say something.
Mm. Do you feel like you'd still be able to go on with the relationship, just not forgiving that moment, or like what would that look like for you?
It's about closure. It's about dealing with change. It's about helping me deal with change. Helping you deal with change.
Mm.
I'm fine with any change. Change is inevitably maybe not in the direction I want, but I can settle into a position, you know? I can be okay. But to get through that change and to get into that place where I'm settled and I feel okay again, the not knowing, the not knowing is hard to deal with.
Mm. So closure of like saying final words, or at least indicating that a change is taking place, and kind of like respecting you enough to help you through that by indicating that clearly, is what you find helpful, or
Yeah, I think as someone that supports the people in my life, I am responsible to them to make them aware of why I abandoned them if I abandoned them. That's a responsibility I hold because they have a right to know.
hmm.
I'm as much of a part of their world as they are of mine. So to take a part of their world away without telling them why, just leaving them, not necessarily up, like you will be upset it happened. Anybody's upset when something's taken from them. But in
Mm.
the end, when they get over that, what they really want to know is why. So I'm fine with being abandoned. I've learned to be abandoned. I've learned to give up people that I love. But it's very rare that I feel like I can move on if I wasn't able to talk to them about it. Before, after.
That's a good answer. On my end, this is really interesting actually, because like Jake and I asked this question on the last call, and our answers were pretty similar, but the way I phrased mine was like, again, the question is, I would never forgive you if, and I think my answer on that last call was, there's nothing that anyone could do that I wouldn't forgive them for, because not being able to forgive limits my capacity to heal and to grow. And that was my answer on that call. And I think asking the same question is interesting because it allows you to change and advance your answers. And I think for me, like, part of like I want that to be true, and then actually examining my experience, there are things that I haven't forgiven people for, even though I want to. Like, and I want that to be, I want to be able to heal in those ways. But I think the way you put it, like closure, like there's some people I just don't have closure with, and I'm never going to get closure with. And that's really hard. It's, I think, one of the hardest things to deal with. Um, so the difference between like acceptance that it happened, forgiving them for doing it, and getting closure on it happening, I don't know. Those are I'm not. I wouldn't be great at defining the differences between those, but
I would say life is a single player game most of the time. You live all of your own, and then you die all of your own, and everything in between is the same. The only part that seems multiplayer or two player is when you get into a real relationship with someone and your lives are intertwined.
Mm.
So you can move on your own from lots of things. But from another person, when a person decides to leave and untwine their lives from yours without saying anything, the experience of being left behind without saying anything is not comparable.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I got 3 of those people out there. And I've learned so much from each one. And they're not all romantic. Some of them are friends. But my God, how painful and how upsetting is it to not get closure?
Yep, that's the
Spent
truth
like
of it.
4 years in therapy trying to get it, and I can't. Like accepting that you might never hear back. It's just like so fundamentally unsatisfying and doesn't make me feel any better.
Yep.
You can do all these things and work on yourself in all these ways, but I don't really know if it's ever gonna like fill that need or gap or lack. Doesn't mean you can't have a full and happy life, but it's like anytime I think of opioids, I miss opioids. You know, it's like I can do other things and lead a healthy life, but that's always going to be there, I think. And I think it's the same thing with kind of those incidences where I didn't get closure. It's like I can lead a happy life whenever I focus on those incidents. There's still going to be like a very apparent lack of closure. Okay. My most persistent sexual fantasy is blank.
Um, Persistent? Is that what does persistent mean? Just
Like it keeps coming
persistent.
up, the one that keeps rising to the surface for you, or like the one that's like, yeah,
Over what period of time?
I don't know, man. It's your answer. You get to define that. Could be today, could be your life. Could be since we've had this call.
Sexual fantasy? That's so weird. I don't really have fantasies. I have preferences. Yeah, I don't really have
Hmm.
fantasies. I
There's
don't
not
have
like a,
like a
a specific
thing.
scenario.
No, I don't have like scenarios that I want to happen. You know what I mean?
Okay, okay.
So I don't think I have a persistent fantasy. Hold on, let me think about it. No, there's no like. I guess I have had a fantasy, but it's never a persistent one, or even remotely consistent one. There's nothing. I don't have fantasies. The only people have fantasies of things that they don't think will ever happen, which I don't see the point of, or people have fantasies when they can't normally get sex
Mm.
or something because I don't understand that position. I don't have, you know.
Because if you have like the agency to go out and do it, then it's not a fantasy. It's just something that you've done, that you've enjoyed. Maybe.
Right. I've heard someone describe, oh, I want to come home and there's like a apple thief from the grocery store, and like I don't know, like I get where you're getting at. Like I appreciate role play and creativity,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't think there's like that hasn't spawned an idea in my mind that is
Mm.
very titillating to the point where it's repeated itself even a few times. Really, I would say.
Mm.
I have more memories. I have more like persistent um memories. Like I almost will get attached to the most recent thing that's happened because it's the most vivid thing I can remember.
Mm. Do you like replay
And
those memories, or like how does
right,
that show up?
in that sense, and it wouldn't be like, I mean, like in that situation, then I'll have a memory of something happen, and the fantasy is now I'm in that scene because I remember it so well that I'm in the scene, so I can do anything I want. But that isn't necessarily like create. I don't have an itinerary, you know. I'm
Mm.
very in the moment, very whatever I feel like in the moment, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's super consistent. I guess like if I had a fantasy, my consistent fantasy is like initiating intercourse, like the actual like penetration moment. I've like pretty much since I was a kid, before I
Those are
even
two
knew what that
different
was
things.
like.
Wait. So those are two different things.
Not
Initiation.
initiating the penetration, like
Okay. 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 Okay.
actual the moment up
The
to
moment of.
and actual
Yeah.
penetration. Even before when I was a kid and I didn't really know what that was like, I think that was always the titular moment, the moment that I held up as like, oh, this is gonna be the great moment. And then even still now, even though I've experienced it and I wouldn't put it so high on the moments list all the time, like it's up there here and there and
Mm.
it has its moment, but it isn't necessarily a 10 out of 10 all the time. So even with that in mind, I still pretty regularly fantasize about that.
It's really interesting because I feel like as young boys and men, when we're in that moment before we've had like penetrative sex, I think we do spend a lot of time fixating and fantasizing about it, right? So like kind of evaluating like the remnants of that left over in our adult life once it's happened. It's kind of interesting to think about.
Do you
You're
know
definitely
how
right. Sorry, go ahead.
in exotic fiction, a lot of the time is spent on the foreplay, which
Yeah.
creates this like climax moment of penetration, and then they move on to like another climax moment of the actual climax. Like that's kind of how it goes. You get
Yeah.
foreplay,
Yeah.
which creates tension, which creates apex of penetration. That's I don't know. Like, I guess I did like I read some minor like smut when I was a kid. That was like adventurers who also had sex in the book kind of thing. Um, and so when I fantasize now about that particular moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's very similar in the way that you would read it in a book. Like it's about the build up to the climax of that moment. And in my
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, it's the same thing. So like it's about sort of giving description and visual context and tangibility to the foreplay or the even the very few moments up until penetration and then actual penetration.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I hadn't really thought about it, so
It's kind
I
of
don't
like
know.
an edging.
Ask me again in a week, and it might be different kind of
All right, all right. It
thing.
kind of sounded like an edging fantasy a little bit.
Yeah, yes and no, but also like something about I think edging is like 80% of the fantasy, but the other 20% is um like don't get me wrong, penetration feels good, but I don't know if it's worth fantasizing about good. Like people don't have sex for penetration. They have sex for the intercourse part, like the act post penetration, pre climax. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. Like there's a good bit of the enjoyment is penetration. That's why there's exiting and repenetration. Like there's like people do that on a regular basis. But I wouldn't say there's enough of the pleasure gained just from the penetration for it to be worth fantasizing over. Yet I often fantasize about it.
That's a fair point. And I think it's really interesting because like like in I think culturally like foreplay is not as focused on as I feel like it deserves to be because like foreplay is like like just the tension that builds and builds and builds, I think is in so many ways like among the most enjoyable aspects. And I feel like all of the cultural attentions on like that, like between penetration and climax, which to be fair is a really wide range of activities, and you could do a lot of wide range activities, but like what percentage of porn videos focus on the foreplay? I would argue like not as many as focus on the actual act. And that's interesting because I think like in practice, functionally, like in relationships, like at least maybe this is just me and my preferences, but like foreplay is like among the most enjoyable parts.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure.
I would say like my persistent sexual fantasy is probably, it really changes. Like persistence, not a word that aligns with my answer to this. Um, but I've been like interested in like group stuff for a while, and I think scared to do it for like safety reasons, like health, sexual health reasons. And it's possible. It just takes more work. Um, and it hasn't really been time. I don't know. It hasn't felt like time to pursue that because I've just had other things going on. But that's something that I keep like a thought I keep coming back to is like, oh, it'd be fun to like feel like a kid in a candy shop, like with a bunch of options, you know, doing a bunch of stuff.
Mm.
But it's interesting because I think that's really popular in gay culture, like bathhouse culture and just like group, like massive group stuff. I think in heterosexual culture, it's a little
Which
different.
is wild to me because I can't imagine a vetting process that allows for more than a handful of individuals.
Right. And that's why it's like, yeah, that's hard because it's like what I want is more than a handful of individuals, but I also want to stay safe. And those things are kind of inherently feel like they're in conflict unless it's like extremely well organized and like
You
expensive
would
and take.
have to. I feel like with age, the like you experience and number of individuals that you have experience with could increase. So, like, let's say if I know 10 individuals
Yeah, because
that
your
I
networks are forming that
yeah,
they're in
then I
network.
don't need to vet them in that way. I've already vetted them. I've known them all for 10 years, and there's 10 of them. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's really fair.
that's probably the only real way it ever happens where everybody feels super comfortable is where like they're all in their 40s and 50s and they just know each other for so long that it's not that weird.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, next card. I need to let go of blank.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, say
I
more.
need more acceptance of death. Because of the position I'm in financially, I'll never be outside of a worker position.
Mm,
And happiness is never the goal. Peace is,
mm.
which in lies joy. So I don't need to live tomorrow. I don't need to change my environment or my situation. And I don't need to be happy.
So accept death. accept the nature of reality, the social and financial reality that you're in, and pursue peace and joy. Good answers, man. I like that. I need to let go of. Oh, I gotta think about this for a second. Yeah, I'm just like working on letting go of anxiety, I would say, in a variety of contexts, but mostly work related. Just when I feel it, I like try to breathe deep and wide into my stomach and let it go and ground myself in the larger picture and focus on things that I can do instead of the anxious feelings. I think, yeah. So just been like trying to like label it when it comes up, identify it, take a breath and let it go, while still trying to change my situations that are facilitating it coming up more. So both like an immediate first aid approach and also like a planning approach. It's been good. It's been getting better. I think I have a lot of anxiety to work through, and overall, I think it's been getting better. Such a thing, it just takes time. All right, next question. I feel most attractive when blank.
I feel the least attractive when I'm around attractive people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the most attractive when my partner expresses her attraction.
Mm. Trying to remember what that 5 love languages category is. It's like praise, verbal praise, or like kind words, or something along that line, right? Like kind of like a verbal affirmation. You know, it's really interesting, like thinking about when I feel most attractive. When I feel most attractive, but I think the question and the modifier is to who or to whom. Um, I think like it's rare that I feel attractive as a male a lot of the times. Even when like Mina says it a lot, it's like nice and it makes me feel good, but it doesn't make me feel attractive. I think it's really interesting because like I don't know. I don't want to like make blanket statements, but I feel like society kind of like gives messaging and signaling to women a lot more about their levels of attractiveness than men, just socially. Not talking about like movie stars, just talking about your average day to day male versus female. Gets different messaging around that. I feel like men typically don't get a lot. Um, I cross dress, and cross dressers often, I think, try to dress up as the thing that they're attracted to. When I and I'm going to use I statements here because I don't want to blanket all cross dressers, but when I dress up, a lot of it's for me. I'm trying to embody a girl that I would want to meet and hang out with. Um, and it just happens that I end up getting a decent amount of compliments along the way, a lot more than I get as a male. Um, and so there's like internal attractiveness there and trying to like embody a fantasy that I have so that I can experience it most fully. And then there's an external attraction of people also giving a lot more compliments than I would get as a guy. Um, so I feel most attractive when, yeah, I'm in full cross dress, my hips are moving, when music's on. It's really interesting. I was at an EDM show. I was at a rave, and I was in like fucking khaki shorts. And man, like it is so hard for your hips to move in khaki shorts. But when you wear a skirt to a rave, hips are flying. Like it really, like what you're wearing. In for me, and maybe this is just me, but what I'm wearing really impacts my dancing and how I dance, my ability to dance, what that dance looks like, and what feels comfortable. Like I don't feel comfortable like swinging and swaying my hips and doing back bends like in masculine shorts. Like it just feels something about it feels like I don't not not wrong, but like just like I don't know. It's just like yeah, I guess wrong. I'm not judging that other people are wrong for doing that, but I feel wrong doing that. But when I do the same thing in a skirt, I feel great and I feel right. That doesn't mean I want to be in a skirt all the time, but like in environments where I'm going to be dancing and feeling myself, I want to be as flowy as possible. And I think cross dress enables that because I got a whole different side of me that comes out. A lot of like I listen to like a lot of like Doja Cat and Megan Thee Stallion and try to cultivate like bad bitch energy, and I like it's so empowering and not something I feel comfortable doing in like white male masculinity. But the second like the lights go down, the music comes up, and I'm in cross dress, like it feels great. So like probably the most empowering I've ever felt, which maybe is like a reflection of our culture. But that's a whole other conversation and a whole other prompt card. But yeah, so that's a long-winded answer for me, I think. Um, okay. Next card. I finally have some clarity about blank.
I finally have some clarity about how it how it feels to be an animal. After the eclipse, there weren't any discernible lines between the people and the animals. We were all just as scared as the birds who thought it was about to be nighttime.
Nice. I like that. I like that. I finally have some clarity after a new boss that I have just drilled it into my head again and again. Um, that like I'm safe and things are going to be okay. I think a lot of my anxiety is like, oh, if I do bad at work, oh, I'm going to get fired. Oh, I'm not going to make rent. Oh, I'm going to be on the street. Oh, I'm going to lose my relationship with Mina. Oh, I'm going to lose everything in the cats and have to start over again. And it's like, so like one failed performance doesn't instantly lead to being on the street alone and without any resources. But in my head, it goes right from there to there. And that's not real. So I have clarity that I've been catastrophizing a lot. And that's caused a lot of me to expend a lot of energy on anxiety and then to suffer and be dysfunctional. And then it creates an anxiety cycle. And that's not based in reality. It's based in a catastrophization. I don't know if that's a word. Catastrophe. I've made up in my mind. Yeah, that's my answer.
Oh,
Of
I used to really struggle with panic and worry, and I don't anymore. I don't really know what manifested that transition, but every once in a while I do. And I treat it the same as if I knew someone that was worried about something. Because I've had that situation happen many times. Someone comes to me and they're worried about something that's going to happen in a situation that I've been in 1,000 times, but they've never been in before. Because I've been working in kitchens for 10 years. I've been going to music festivals for about 10 years. I've been doing a lot of things for a long time. So when someone's new to one of those spaces and they're scared, I know how to deal with that. I can tell them the things that are probably not going to go wrong that they think is going to go wrong. And I can ask them, what else are you worried about? And then I can go over that. And then I can ask them, what else are you worried about? And we can just do that until they don't have any more fears or worries. And I've learned that I can do the same thing with myself. That when I'm in my most panic mode, my most worried mode, and I can't think or do anything else, I can literally take a moment, take a step back, and ask myself, well, what am I worried about? Well, here's what I'll do if I do that. And if not, I'll deal with this. And if it doesn't work out, this will happen. And if that situation happens, I'll still be okay. What else am I worried about? And I just go through the list. And to be honest with you, it's never that long. A handful of things that are like existential and seem big to me. But then once I've gone over it, a few days later, it doesn't cause me as much anxiety. In the moment, I don't get a lot of benefit out of it, but it doesn't persist. I don't end up worrying about it over and over the next day and the next day. And that's what I'm really trying to tackle. I don't have any magic thing that I can do to stop myself from worrying about the big things that could go wrong, because the big things that could go wrong could go wrong. But I do have some way to make it to tomorrow and not worry about them again so dramatically. And that way is just tackling it in the moment. Just practicing in the moment de-escalation.
And I feel like that list of things that you're anxious about, like you said, it's not really that long when you investigate it. But when you don't examine it, it's almost like two mirrors facing each other. And it's really only two things, but it creates an infinite hallway of anxiety, you know? And then like when you actually investigate it, you realize it's just two things instead of an infinite hallway of mirrors of anxiety.
That's the biggest part of any panic or worry, is that and in retrospect, it's not as big of a deal as it was to seem to be in the moment. And all of the solutions or band-aids you can put on to deal with them, the most stressful moments, involve recognizing and minimizing the actual situation as opposed to the situation in your mind.
Yeah. I think you asked me in maybe September. I was really, really, really worried about something. And you took me down a thought process of like, all right, like imagine the worst possible outcome and like the worst case scenario you can possibly imagine. Like, would you still be able to be you and figure out a way, no matter how difficult, to like be happy or at peace in that space, given who you are today? And I think that was a really, I go back to that exercise a lot. And I think like that would be helpful for anyone is like picture the worst case scenario and then would it be possible for you to still be you and like to like still grow and heal and be authentic in that situation. And I think the answer is yes. And I think that's really helpful. That was really helpful for me.
Yeah, a lot of the time our minds are already there. Our minds are already imagining a world where the worst thing has happened. And
Yeah.
now, because we've imagined it in our mind, it is real. And now our mind is just dealing with the situation. Our minds like to complete loops. When I ask a question, it just finds an answer, whether the answer is wrong or not. So when it's put into a situation, it tries to find a way out and find to deal with it. But if you've never been in extreme situations, then you don't know how you would deal with them or what would happen. So your mind's just sort of spinning with ideas of how you could and couldn't deal with them over and over and over. So instead of letting your mind exist in that world, exist in it for a moment, bring it here into the now and exist in it in that moment. Because since we all end up there, there's no use in imagining that we could be extreme situation or worrying about if we think about those things. Instead, we should just do it. You should just actually be in an extreme moment for those moments, you know?
Yeah. 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 Because then in being in crisis, instead of being in crisis all the time through the proxy of anxiety, you're only in crisis when actual crisis occurs. But I think it's really important. I mean, and what you did in that exercise is like, you're like, okay, well, imagine that crisis. And now imagine yourself building a way out or like creating a way out or growing your way out of it or like people just imagine the crisis. They don't imagine like, oh shit, it would be possible to actually fix things or progress if that crisis happened. They just picture about the crisis and the consequence. They never picture about how they could legitimately solve solve solutions, apply solutions, and like be okay, right? Like if all I worry about is the hurricane hitting my house, and I never ever think about, okay, but I actually have the capacity to put my life back together. Like if a hurricane hits my house, like I will be okay starting over. It would suck, but like I would be okay. I have friends and family who care about me. I got a fiance who cares about me. I can build a life. I have a resume. I can get a job. Like we never do the building side of it. It's always the catastrophizing.
Well, that building is like a positivity. It's a switch from like a negative mindset to a positive mindset, and the way you end up from like, oh, I'm kind of worried about how things could go wrong to I'm worried about the worst possible situation is your mind slowly, surely goes, then this could go wrong, then this could go wrong, then this
Yeah,
could
yeah,
go
yeah,
wrong. That's how you get there to begin with. So at
yeah,
any point along the journey, if you get practice at it, you can break that cycle. But once you're there already, you need recognizing that that's how you got there. It gives you the solution. You
yeah,
just take any positive step at all, and now you're not going in that direction anymore. Because
yeah,
once you're at the bottom, then you're just toiling. Like if you're literally dead or in a ditch or the worst possible situation you can imagine, then there's no worse place for your mind to imagine to go. So it's just going to spin until you offer a solution or a way out or a possible like context. You add some context or perspective that could see it in a more positive light.
yeah. For like my specific situation where I'm specifically currently dealing with anxiety is like, okay, if things go bad at work and I do get fired and then I go and do a lot of personal debt, like like Mina and I both have capacities to get decent paying jobs no matter what happens. We I think are both we care about each other enough and we're smart enough to like kind of support each other through it and figure out ways to pool resources through it. And even if I did have a long period of unemployment, like theoretically, like I could sign up for benefits if I really, really needed to go that route. And we could live in a smaller apartment. We could live in a studio apartment instead of a 2 bedroom. And none of those things like include the possibility of like me being on the street. I just like go there in my mind, but that's not at all how it would play out, you know? Um, so I think like just
I
verbalizing that is helpful.
I do find that even in practice, when I'm able to stop myself from going from 0 to 60, and I can sort of recognize the process and then realize that with the process, the result that I'm putting in my mind that's so extreme of being on the street or dead or whatever isn't possible. I think then after that, you do have to then practice walking that path. I find I still do need to regularly sit down and think, okay, then what do I do if this happens? Then what do I do if this happens? Then what do I do if this happens? And then I do find an end. There is a worst possible situation for my life, and it isn't jail or death. It's typically something pretty simple, pretty easy to deal with for most people. But I still have to deal with it, and I still have to think out how I would deal with it. And then once I've done that, I know it like a story where it begins and where it ends. I would deal with this, then I would deal with this, then I would deal with this. But that doesn't mean the worry of the story doesn't come back up. So the way I deal with the worry again is I go through the story again. I deal with this, then I deal with this, then I deal with this. And sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes I find myself going, "Why are we doing this again?" But I know that the one way I know to fix it is to go through the process. So I do it.
Yeah, and I think it really ties into what you said earlier. Like for me, I don't go through those steps a lot, and I'm working on going through them more because I find that the monster that is unseen is way bigger than the monster that's seen. Like if I go through the steps, it's not as bad as I fear that it will be if I actually play it out in my head, like what's actually real and possible. So it's just like your example in the Kitchen Art Festival. Like you have 10 years of experience, you can help quell newcomers' anxiety because you've seen these issues before. And I think if you've tread that path in your mind of oh, if this happens then this will happen, then this will happen, but this is a way that I could solve for that, or this is a way out of that. Like if you go down that path again and again, then you become very familiar with that territory and that storyline in those worst case scenarios. And then I think that takes away some of their power and actually empowers you to not be so scared and intimidated by like what could happen because you've thought about it. I'm not saying unhealthily obsess over it, but I think not exploring it at all either isn't doing anyone a service. So like
Actually, I think the ultimate goal for me personally is to eradicate it from my life. So I don't
mm,
see any benefit of worrying. I don't see any benefit of considering what I would do in any situation at all, positive or negative, because it isn't happening to me, and I don't know when it will. So the only time I do this, the only time I go through the practice of going, this is what I would do, this is what I would do, is when I'm having the anxiety, is when I'm caught up in the middle of a whirlwind, when I don't know another way out. Otherwise, every part of my practice is avoiding getting into that situation, creating a
yeah, I agree.
positive mindset and directing myself into a position where I'm not as worried or complaining about the environment I'm in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good call out. Like um yeah, avoiding that anxiety, but when it comes up, that might be like a useful tool to try to ground
Right.
yourself. But yeah, definitely staying in the here and now and focusing on what you can actually control. Like the serenity prayer, like, you know, give me the strength to control what's in my control, and fuck, I'm gonna mess up the prayer. But, you know, like let me control what I can and not worry about the things I can't control and have the wisdom to know the difference, more or less. But can't believe I don't have the serenity prayer memorized. It's wild.
Uh,
Okay, next card.
I
I'm
probably have time for one
envious.
more.
Okay, I hope to be remembered for.
whatever I work on the hardest. So right now it's my personality. I'm trying to cultivate an experience in my inner world that yields a personality, an outgoing expression of who I am authentically, that is a projection of happiness and love that I experience inside. So if that's what I work on the most and what I achieve the most, that's what I want to be remembered for the most. But if I grow past that and begin a new work and achieve something in that endeavor, I hope that's what I remembered for the most. I hope whatever I put the most time and energy, what I dedicate most of my life to, that's what I want to be remembered for.
It feels like a living answer, not a fixed answer, because it's like flexible and adaptable.
It's what I remember others for. People are remembered for who they are. Who they are is defined by who they are over time. Who they are over time changes, but becomes an average of what they work on the most. So when you start to work, and whatever you work on the longest puts the most weight on that average. So in the end, who you will be an average of what you worked on the most.
Yeah,
And then you'll be remembered for who you were.
I think who you are is like a sum total of how you spend your time, energy, attention, and intention. I think the sum product of those things is kind of who you end up being over time.
And that's the work. I'm not attentive. I'm not aware. I don't have to care. I don't have to carry weight or be responsible when I'm not working. When I'm doing those things, it is the work. Work isn't necessarily bad. We have enjoyment in our work. We play in our work. We make it fun. But that doesn't mean it's not work.
Well said. Trying to think how I want to answer. I hope to be remembered for. I think it's kind of a two-part answer, and also aligned with what you said. Like I think what you said is overarching umbrella that contains my answers. Um, I hope to be remembered as a person who makes everyone feel like they're deserving of love and respect, no matter who they are, what they've done, where they're coming from. And I hope to be remembered for empowering people to live a better life that's more authentic and has less suffering, whatever that means for them. Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful that you decided to sit down with me and do this podcast, man. I think you had some great, absolutely fire answers. I'd love to do another one at some point. I'm just really grateful for your time.
Cool, it was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Adam. I love you, man. Have a good night.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me in my conversation with Adam Anderson. And now I'd like to read to you the poem that I referenced in the question regarding the person who taught me the most about love. This poem was written in 1978 by Vietnamese monastic and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh. It is titled, Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply, every second I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest. To be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in a clear pond, and I am a grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl refugee on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am also the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so that I can hear all of my cries and laughter at once, so that I can see that all of my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. Thank you for joining us on episode 2 of Emotional Side Quest. I hope you've picked up some useful experience points that you can bring with you on your main quest. I love you all so much, and I am so genuinely excited to see what amazing adventurers you become. Aloha.